Bang ding ding, trademark. He come out 6'7" tall. Bang ding ding, 1 star. Bang dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding. It is a perfect day.
Woke up to the sound of the garbage truck again. Upstairs neighbor's toilet's leaking on my head. And cars broke down, I missed the bus, there runs at 10. I had a feeling this was a day to stay in bed. I finally left my pad right under Jumbo's cloud roof. A police officer pulled out his gun and said, I said, sir, you got the wrong guy. I guess it's just the perfect day. It's just the perfect day. Na, 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 na,
Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of Eggs. This week's special guest is Jen McFarland. Jen is the CEO of Women Conquer Business, where she consults business owners on how to work logically and intuitively to reach their organizational goals. Further, Jen is the host of Women Conquer Business podcast. She releases new episodes each week. They're available on all the major platforms, and you can subscribe to Jen's weekly newsletter filled with inspiration and practical tips for business leaders at jenmcfarland.com/free. So without any further ado, let's get right into this conversation. Welcome to the show, Jen McFarland.
Hey, Jen, how's it going?
I'm great. How are you guys? Thanks for having me.
Not too
Of
bad.
course.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for making the time to do this. Really excited to have you on. I think we've got a great conversation ahead, so I'm looking forward to that. So I guess before we get too far down any particular rabbit hole, let's talk a little bit about who you are and where you come from.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Meridian, Idaho. Back in the day, it was a small town of 5,000 people.
Now it's
Not
the
anymore.
largest
area.
growing city in the U.S. right now. Pretty much,
That's
right?
right. That's
Yeah,
right.
it's one of
Y'all know a little bit about where I'm from. I
Oh,
forgot
yeah.
about that.
Yeah, we're Pocatellians, so yeah, we know Boise pretty well.
Yeah, and so when I grew up there, it was like 5,000 people. Went to my high school reunion, saw pictures, and we were all pretty much shocked. These days, I live in Portland, Oregon. I started my business in 2016, but I've had a lot of stops along the way. I'm probably one of the few people that you'll meet who was, went from working in a warehouse to being an artist and a DJ, going into the Peace Corps, doing tech project management, getting a master's degree, and now being an entrepreneur. Like, I've been all over the place. I've lived in Arizona, Kazakhstan, but right now, Portland, Oregon is a great place to be, here with my husband and Boston Terrier. So
Nice.
That's a really high level
No, that's awesome.
from Idaho to like everywhere.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask you. I saw in some of the notes that we had before here that it looks like maybe you have a Twitter or something for your dog. Is that right? So
No, it's just one of my favorite things to follow.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I have a friend who has a Boston Terrier who is very popular on social media. And so her name is Sloan the Bug is her thing on Instagram. And she's influential little Boston Terrier.
Little
pup.
dog, yeah.
So,
The dog has more sponsorship than we do for this show, so.
no, it's pretty funny.
Yeah,
she has a
lot of
luggage
dogs have more sponsorship.
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, I can't figure it out. Yeah, my friend who owns the dog got her a luggage sponsorship, and then of course all the usual, the treats and the leashes and all that kind of stuff too. But it's pretty funny.
So it
I have
sounds
to
like
look
you.
that one up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like you've done a little bit of everything. We kind of have similar backgrounds, from working in the warehouses to DJing to everything like that. How did you kind of get to running a podcast and talking about, business?
Leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess that, growing up in Idaho, I was like, this isn't really for me. So I always knew I wanted to travel. And I would say that the really big, shift that happened is while I was in college, one of my friends went into the Peace Corps. And I was like, well, this is really cool. And then she started sending me all of these letters. And I'm like, this is something I want to do. I want to try this. And then a week before graduation from college, I met this guy at a kegger party that I crashed,
Nice.
meaning I wasn't invited. And I was standing next to the keg with my friend, who incidentally was the one leaving for Peace Corps. And we are both like, this is so boring.
Let's
and
do
then
a
this
keg
guy
stand.
walked up.
Yeah,
Right.
you had this conversation while one of you was upside down on top of the keg, of course.
Maybe. But what I can tell you is this guy who's now my husband walked up to me and hit on both of us at the same time.
Oh, nice.
I
Pretty
appreciate
classic.
that kind of efficiency.
Yeah.
And honesty, right?
Yeah, right?
He was like, I was just casting a line out, just casting a line, and I'm like, yeah, I was like in. And I thought, well, probably Peace Corps isn't going to happen. But he was also, we dated for a while and then we got married, but he was also kind of had this wanderlust, where we were always traveling. And so we went into the Peace Corps together, which is pretty unusual. And that was really when I developed this love for managing projects, kind of realizing that projects are everywhere. After I got back from the Peace Corps, I managed a nonprofit for a while and then got a master's degree in leadership, which a lot of people are like, you can do that? It's like, yeah, you can. But what I learned there isn't necessarily what I teach now, because I have had a lot of experiences. And I think we all know that school teaches us some things and then there's real life.
Yeah.
So,
Which oftentimes is dramatically different.
What are some of the differences that you noticed that stood out to you? Like they were teaching you, but doesn't really apply now?
Well, I think that we're going through a lot of big shifts right now, just with the different generations. Like people who are my age and older, I'm a Gen Xer, they really believe in this like top down kind of do as I say, because I told you so kind of thing. And starting with my generation, we were kind of like, whoa, bro, I don't really like this authority stuff. And then every subsequent generation after that has been like, hey, what about me? I've got a voice. I've got some ideas. And so a lot of what I learned was that command and control. And what we're really seeing in the world is a lot of top down, bottom up, and sharing and collaborating across, generations and maybe where you are ranked within an organization. And they don't talk about that. Maybe they're starting to do it now, but 10 years ago, that wasn't really a thing.
Sure.
So that's one of the big disconnects.
Yeah. So do you have any insights just in your consultative career? Like as you're spending time with leaders, I mean, presumably you're talking to people who, maybe your age or older and sort of did grow up in that way. They're trying to adapt and become a modern manager. How are you finding people, like, are people open to the idea of changing? Like, are they actually making steps to move in the right direction? I feel like all too often people sort of say they want to do stuff, but they're just trying to do it their old way. But by saying they're working on it, they can somehow get a pass or something. So I wonder if you had any, good experience, or if you can share, are managers actually trying to get better?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Sure. I think it's a little bit of both, right? I mean, I think you're absolutely right. It's good to say, oh, I'm working on it and it feels good and everybody, but in the day-to-day, people can see if you really are working on it or not. If the bad communication is continuing, if morale is down because people don't know what they're doing or why, because people now want to know why something is happening. And it doesn't mean you have to give away all of your secrets, as it were, but it means that if you share enough so people can buy in, you get a lot further. So a lot of times it's about that incremental change, maybe improving communication. Another thing that I work through with people is incorporating gratitude into the workplace. Mm-hmm. So just showing some appreciation for people goes a really long way.
Yeah, it's amazing how far a thank you will go.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's not going to cost you anything, right? You can have a gratitude jar instead of a swear jar at work. And when something
I feel like the swear
happens,
jar is going to make more money,
yeah.
At least right now in the short term.
Well,
hopefully we're evolving.
I mean,
was it your swear jar at the house that I had to contribute to all the time?
Yes.
Or was that some? Okay,
yes, it
yeah.
was. It was actually a shut up jar because it was for our kids. But it was shut up and beyond.
Yeah, but the instant I walk in and say shut up, the kids, you got to put money in the jar.
Oh yeah. No way out.
So do you just show up with like,
I just bring a dollar with a quarter and just throw it in for advance.
Yeah. It's like going to the laundromat when he comes to our place. Yeah. He just brings a pocket full of quarters.
So
totally.
One of the questions that we ask a lot of the people on our show is, what's one of the biggest failures that you've lived through and had to overcome starting a business and getting to where you are today? Is there anything that stands out in your history that you would like to address?
Sure. I've always been a really high performer, so I don't really have like a project that failed. But the master's degree I got in was in public administration, and a lot of that was because I really believed in like helping others, and Peace Corps was like so pivotal to my life. I just really enjoyed that experience that I was like, I'm going to work in public service, AKA government.
Yeah.
And it didn't work out. And a lot of it is, and I worked there for 10 years and I did some really great things, led some big projects, left as an executive. Like from all outward appearances, everything was phenomenal, right? But it just really wasn't for me. And it was slowly eroding like parts of me that I really just didn't want to lose. And I grieved it. Like I left the working world and started my business. And I was still like grieving that as like a giant failure in my life. And it sounds weird to say, and I don't even know if people can like relate to that or not as like a big failure. But when you really are passionate about something and you really want it to work out and it's just not, sometimes that just is devastating. And it was for me for quite some time. And I think it kind of stunted some of that early business growth because I was still like pining for what could have been.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and so I guess sort of to that point, or to the idea of, or I guess in my curiosity about Peace Corps, I wanted to talk to you about, so this is sort of something that I've seen come up a time or two, but it's kind of a Gen X, Gen Z, Gen Y, millennial kind of problem, I think, which is that this idea, so when you go into the Peace Corps, like I think one of the things that works best for you is, I mean, you're a volunteer, you're there working. I don't know if they give you a little stipend or something to live on, but and maybe you can inform that. But I mean, you're essentially doing work for free. And then what you find out of, or, generally speaking, is most people have these profound experiences that impact them one way or the other. One of the things that, at least was really common when I was young was this idea of working for free too. I mean, I spent a lot of time working for free for a lot of different people to gain expertise or knowledge to build my career up. But it seems to be now there's a little bit of a hesitancy or people don't feel like they should be doing as much free work. And I wondered if you had any perspective on that. I mean, just given that you had such a profound experience as a volunteer, what role do you think volunteerism or free internships, things like that, play in the marketplace today?
Sure, that's a really great question. Personally, I think everybody should do some sort of public service, some sort of service-based project, volunteering in your community. It can be through your church. It can be through any sort of organization where you are just making the world a better place because we all are living here. We all have to find ways to find common ground. The goals of Peace Corps are really about building international friendship. And when you go, you're teaching about America, about whatever skill you're sharing. And then the third goal is to come back and share about the experience. And I think that is what is so vital about Peace Corps and what is maybe missing in large part in the United States, because a lot of people don't travel, and traveling really opens doors and really helps us understand maybe where other people are coming from. It really helps to build this community as kind of a global society. Now, you might think, well, that sounds like a bunch of hippie baloney.
Are you a spokesperson for the Peace Corps? Come on.
No, but the people in my group, we were all very kind of like the house of misfit toys, right? People were all across the political spectrum. I was there with my husband. We were both in our 30s. We had, people in their 70s. We had people fresh out of college. So we were kind of a ragtag group who just had this like passion and curiosity to kind of see what was out there. And so I just encourage people who have a passion and a curiosity to look at things like that. We were paid a very small amount every month to live there. And then we were given a really small stipend when we came back. Not as much as someone who, say, does AmeriCorps. They get a lot bigger bonus, believe it or not. Different legislation, different time. I'm not a spokesman for Peace Corps, but I do still stay in touch with some people who are there. I had the pleasure or maybe misfortune of coming back right as Borat was released. So there was a lot of misconceptions about what Kazakhstan was really about.
I was going to say, that was the one time Kazakhstan was hot in the news,
Totally
for something
hot,
other than war or whatever else,
Oil, they're known for oil and former Soviet stuff, So it was a profound experience. Is it for everybody? No. But if you're breathing and living on this planet, it feels good to do something for somebody else. And that is really what Peace Corps did. It opened up my eyes. I grew up a lot. I realized there was a big world out there and how important it is for us to help one another.
So what were you doing while you were there? What were you promoting or talking about? Do they give you projects to do, go build a house, paint a house kind of thing? Or is it pretty much up to you and what message you want to share?
Yes. No, it's both of those things. So I wish I was as cool as my husband. You're gonna be like, oh, we're interviewing the wrong one.
Can we get
he was
him?
In a rock
Is he
band.
in the other room?
He's not.
Darn.
he plays a musical instrument, and he was in a rock band with a group of Russian men. And
he was the lead
but his
flute
day
player?
job. Yeah, he played the jazz flute. No, he played drums in a rock band with really long guitar solos. It was kind of hard sometimes. I would be like, Max, you gotta
say, that sounds like Russian metal to me.
But then during the day he was a teacher, and we were both teachers. And then you just kind of do whatever you see in the community. And again, it's about being curious and saying, hey, hey, that thing isn't working. Why? And then if that's a problem for them, then you talk about a solution. It's really about, if they're like, yeah, I don't really care about that. That's not your secondary project, right? That's not the thing you're going to work on. So,
so maybe this
I did a lot of teaching.
Yeah. So maybe this is a good place to segue into this. So one of the things that, we came across in our notes about you is that you seem to have some perspective on helping people get ideas off the ground. And I assume that this came a little bit from, this experience in the Peace Corps where you were, basically looking for, identifying, and building projects. I didn't understand, or I didn't know from the Peace Corps whether they just delegated to you, hey, you're on Adobe painting duty, or if you, actually got to sort of pick whatever you wanted to do. But it sounds like maybe you get to sort of find projects and identify things and then work on them. So how do you, whether it's in business or in the Peace Corps, you maybe alluded to this idea of curiosity, but how do you identify a project and then sort of get the wheels up?
Yeah, so it starts in a couple of different ways, right? There's a lot of listening that has to happen. So if somebody hires me to work with them, I ask questions because I'm genuinely curious and really want to help. And business owners who are willing to answer those questions, it's very helpful because then I have some context around what's going on. But the real secret sauce is really in listening. Like I said, if somebody's just not down with doing something, why force it? But if somebody's really talking about something, listen to the words and the way that they describe it. And even if it's different how you would describe it, those words are telling you the story of what somebody really wants to have get done and what that project really is about. And that's really where it all starts.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think that's one of the things. It's a subject that's come up on this show a couple times in the last few weeks, is this idea that, you've got something, this maybe a little business you want to start or whatever it is. And then you go to start, you start gathering research and you're looking online at all the Gary Vaynerchuks of the world, and you're trying to find your way in this life. And no matter how much people sort of dump knowledge on you, for some reason you can't move forward. And I don't know if it's just an experience thing or a fear thing or what it is, but it seems that there's some sort of barrier keeping you from moving forward. Do you have any ideas? So, maybe the next step in that progression. So you've identified this thing as your passion, but how do you turn the corner on it and actually get it moving?
Sure. So the method that I use is actually used a lot in third world countries or, in the developing world. And it is like strategic project planning or management. So the first thing is to kind of listen so that you can kind of develop that project. But it's really important that you understand the goals and the mission of whatever that business or initiative really is, and then the problem that you want to solve. A lot of times people just skip ahead to, to use the Gary Vee example. Well, I'm just going to make all the videos in the world and plaster everything all over social media, without really the understanding that many people don't go on social media to buy anything. They're just there to be entertained and do things. And they're not really looking at all of the other things that have to happen in order for Gary Vee to be Gary Vee, right? So a lot of the stuff under the hood maybe isn't as flashy or as sexy as what you find on social media. But if you can drill into the biggest problem that you want to solve, look at the root causes of that and what would happen if you solve it, then we're kind of in business, right? Then we can start talking about what it would look like if you solved it. What products could you sell that would start to address that problem? And then what tasks would support completing those products that address the core problem that will help you reach your ultimate goals?
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that's a great, guideline for people, because I think it is really difficult, to find that clarity on what you're supposed to be doing. So doing it sort of in a purpose-driven way, like you're describing, I think is really useful. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, how long have you been doing consulting? And how did you get into that? Sorry.
Yeah, no, I started consulting. Well, it's so funny because when I actually started working in government, it was on a consulting basis. And then I got basically hired on as an employee to continue to give recommendations and write reports to kind of help guide, the entity I was working for. And then I kind of broke up with my job and started consulting in
it's
2016
not you, it's me.
on my own. Yeah, it's not you, it's me. Totally.
Although in this case
it was just what?
Although in this case it was them.
Well, for me.
Sorry. Go on.
I don't know. Yeah. So in a way, I've been consulting for a long time and just opening up projects and completing things and giving recommendations and saying, here, take action or don't. This is what I see based on what you've told me. And on the other hand, doing it under my own shingle has only been for about 3 years.
Okay. Well, can you talk a little bit about that shift even, sort of making the move from working for somebody else? You said that you'd spent some time in the tech business, some things like that, so you went from, I guess, sort of typical employment to non-typical working for yourself. What did that transition look like? What did it take? I know in my case, I had to almost be pushed off a ledge. My business came out of as a result of a layoff, but I would have never been brave enough to make the move on my own. So I always wonder what other people's experience is like.
Well, I think that I had a real aha moment where I was like, hey, I know a lot of stuff. And then I realized that I had a lot of friends who were women who led businesses. And at the time I was focusing more on tech, and I realized that there are a lot of people out there who, whether intentionally or not, take advantage of small business owners, charge them way too much for very low services in terms of actual results. And I was like, I can help you with that. And then they wanted to pay me. And I was like, wait.
Love it when that happens.
Who am I to tell you no?
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, hey, this is a thing. And also, I don't like my job. Let's see how that would work out.
So, okay, cool. So you mentioned, or in, some of the stuff or the research that we did in advance, that, basically you would hit sort of a low point in your business. You were asked to do something that was against your values. I don't know if you want to dig into that, but basically you were working 60 hours a week, and then you had this sort of transitionary moment where you decided to go out on your own. What has that experience been like for you since going out on your own? Like, I mean, especially in those early days of new business, I imagine it was a little bit scary.
Yeah, so I think that my story is maybe a little bit unique because the low point hit actually before I went out on my own. And then when I left my job, it was literally like Tina Turner, Proud Mary blaring for like, 3 months, of just like pure joy for being out from under it. And then after that, then it kind of, the reality set in of, when you're on your own, you don't have the support system that you have when you work in a big company, all the people who are helping with all of the things that you maybe didn't know were happening or were taking for granted. All of a sudden you're doing it too. And so then that was kind of the low point after that. The real low point did happen when, I was working on a really big project, and it involved a lot of federal rules and regulations. And I was continually being asked to kind of push the envelope on that to a point of discomfort.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I pretty much went home and I just cried and hugged my husband for a long time and said, I just can't do it anymore. I just can't. Don't make me go back there, which is it sounds so dramatic. And of course, it's not like he was making me. And it's not even that I needed his permission. It was like, but if we're going to do this, we have to go into it together, right? We've been married almost 21 years. I'm not going to take away half of our income without having buy-in, you know?
Yeah, no, it's the struggle of the married entrepreneur. I can relate.
Right. So it really was this big emotional push, and then me giving him some time to think about it. By time, I mean, close to about a day. I'm like, really, I need to know what's going to happen, and I had been looking for another job and just not really found anything that I liked. And he was like, I'm like, we're not going to be homeless. And he was like, okay. And then I took in the letter and I was like, bye. And I gave him a really reasonable amount of time. But I've never regretted leaving.
Yeah,
even though it's hard.
Yeah, it's funny. That seems to be sort of the commonality between most entrepreneurs, is most of them seem pretty happy to have left. Like, it might have taken a nudge or a little something to get out there. But I mean, that was the case with me. But I've been basically on my own, in some form or another for 10 or 12 years now. And so, no hope of looking back, like no interest going back to a regular 9 to 5. So I guess, so you mentioned, some of the problems are this low point at work. You were also working in the tech industry, which, I think most people would sort of agree is sort of male dominant. I wonder, can you speak to a little bit about the experience of a woman in technology, for one? Just, I know a lot of women that are struggling with this right now. And then also just struggles that you face sort of in business, or if you've been, faced with any adversity or have stories of that.
Sure, absolutely. It was, I guess I would say it took a long time for me to realize that some of what was going on had anything to do with me being a woman. I really like to think that that's not the case, but at certain times it was undeniable that was what was happening. And being the only woman in the room, and then kind of learning the art of like letting a colleague think it was their idea, by just kind of planting the seeds.
We need to do this. If I take credit for it, it won't happen. So I'm just going to give it to him and let him roll with it, and I'll thumbs up the whole way.
Right. And sometimes that stuff would happen like on the fly in the middle of a meeting, right? Like I'd be like, hey, I have this idea. Why don't we do this? And it'd be like silence, moving on, and then like 5 minutes later, somebody'd be like, hey, I have this idea. Exactly what Jen said, but I'm not going to acknowledge that Jen said it. And like the first few times I would be like, kind of, pretty irritated. And then I was like, well, at least it got done, and I would kind of, that would be part of the solace, right? And then, but it's frustrating still. Like you want to be heard. Everybody wants to be heard. I think that I turned the corner on a lot of it's undeniably harder. And it is, you have to really earn your chops, and you have to be better than everybody else as a woman in tech. I mean, it's just the truth. I mean, and the example that I have for that is, as I was this position I had before I left, I was leading a team of about 21 people who were doing all different things across the spectrum. And in the beginning, they were all kind of like, what is this? Who is this person? She doesn't understand servers or development or whatever,
I was oh, sorry, go ahead, finish your
go ahead.
You were
no
I was going to ask you, how does leading a tech like group of people and not really having the background in tech, did you have any like problems with that, like lack of knowledge, not being able to kind of relate, or is it kind of just being able to read the people you're working with, acknowledge that there's a problem, and then have them kind of like give you advice and guide you as well?
I mean, a lot of that went on. A lot of that did have to happen for sure. I will say that for several years prior, I was leading tech projects and working heavily in like database and application development, not as a developer, but conducting testing and running the projects. It was a very technical, hands-on before I led this big team. I will say that like what it really means, I mean, everybody, I don't care if you're a Martian, male, female, transgender, everybody wants to talk about what they do.
True.
Right? So the biggest thing is they want to talk about what they do, how they do it, and if you're working on a big team, like why you're there and why you can help people. And I think that the biggest way that I earned like the respect, and we developed camaraderie, and we got stuff done, like we moved mountains. And I think a lot of it had to do more with the fact that when they told me something, instead of just saying, okay, yeah, no, we can't do that, I'd be like, well, tell me why.
Expound,
I mean,
please.
I don't know why.
Yeah. Well, and
tell me why.
And when they give you the answer, being able to not dumb it down, but you know what I mean, like explain it to the layman's terms, it probably helped everyone else kind of get an idea of, oh, we can't do this because of this. How can we overcome that? And it helps everyone in the team, instead of just the people who are working on the database or working on the development side of things. Did you have any, as you were working in the tech field, did you have any problems that you couldn't overcome and that you just had to kind of like sideline and say, we'll address it when the tech comes around to it? Or, I mean, I'm sure lots of people will throw ideas out there that the tech stack doesn't even support, or the technology isn't there yet. I don't know what you were doing, or who you were working for, or what tech field you were working in, but do you ever come across anything like that where you just couldn't accomplish what the client wanted?
Yeah, I mean, that happened a lot when I was working in tech. It was and then you just become, it's a problem solving kind of thing. Like, how essential is that? And it's the same thing with any project, right? Like, people want everything, but there's only so much time, so much money, and you're only going to get so much value out of every single idea, right? So it's important, whether it's tech or something else, to really set up the priorities. And then if, the what you have to have, and what's in, what's out, what phase it goes in, and all of these kinds of things, just so you know when you're rolling things out, how it's going to work. So when the client wants something that is just not possible, which happens a lot, especially in tech, because
right.
like things sound so easy when you say it, and it's so hard to build it.
Well, can't we just duplicate Facebook and make it branded for me? I mean, because that would be cool, right?
Right. Totally cool. Yeah. You got a solid billion to put down towards that?
Yeah, no big deal.
No big deal.
Yeah.
But there are things you can do to kind of like compromise and influence direction and get the workarounds in place to problem solve. And the project that before I left the city, the project I was working on, it was very hamstrung, very small budget at certain times, but affected a large group of people. And so we were in like constant like problem solving mode. And when you rely on your professionals to tell you what and why for their particular field, and you make sure that you have everybody in the room, then people start to realize how they affect one another.
Mm-hmm.
And then they start to problem solve around that. And then you actually get more out of it than if it's a simple client says we have to do it, work it out conversation.
Do you ever bring the client into that conversation and let them hear it directly from the developer? Is that kind of a no-no?
I mean, sometimes. I was a pretty good tech translator. And sometimes the developers didn't want any piece of talking So
Yeah,
so there's
that seems
side
pretty
too.
common, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so let's transition more into the business you're doing today. Let's talk about work fatigue as a topic. So this is something that happens a lot, among entrepreneurs, business leaders, and I guess really everybody.
Podcasters.
Yeah,
I'm fatigued
podcasters.
right now, if you couldn't tell.
And so can you talk about just some tips or tricks or things that people could do to try and avoid getting burned out? I mean, it seems like in your life you bounced from thing to thing to thing to thing to sort of avoid that, and that's not unlike the way that we've gone. But I wonder if you had some practical knowledge you could drop on that subject.
Yeah, so it's funny. I'm coming off of working about every day for about 2 months, so I feel I have to acknowledge that, because otherwise I feel like a little bit of a hypocrite to talk about it. It seems like it's just the way, right? Like we kind of, as entrepreneurs, go in these waves, and we do have to take care of ourselves. What I've gone to now after these last few weeks, which were really pressed by just a lot of travel, speaking engagements and things like that, is realizing that as an entrepreneur, there's never going to be this like golden time where you're suddenly going to have time for yourself. So I've started scheduling it in my day so I can see it, like this is time for me. And then I work a lot around distraction and deep work. And I just encourage people. I actually have a digital download about distraction. Nobody wants any piece of it.
It's been downloaded twice.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, because people don't believe that the phones and computers and all these things are distracting us, and that it's something that we need to diminish our time with. Everybody has a reason, right? Like my kids are at the soccer field, all these different things, when really you're just sitting on Facebook all day, because you haven't gotten your own Facebook developed yet. And so you're sitting there,
Working
and you're
on
taking
it. I'm there, halfway there.
I'm working on it.
He's fundraising right now.
So there's a lot of time wasted in all of this distraction, whether it's the news or social media or eBay and Amazon, right? And so what I do when I'm at my most productive is I use tomato-timer.com, and it's a Pomodoro method timer where I work on one thing for 25 minutes, no email, no nothing, then take a 5-minute break to walk around and do whatever. And then I go back and I go through another session. And there's a lot of different methodologies out there. There's a book that I really like called Deep Work. And it was written by Cal Newport, and he is a computer scientist, and he talks about, productivity, how the brain works. And truly, this world that we live in with all of these distractions, our brain just isn't made to work that way, according to that book and, science.
Yeah, well, and I think you make a really good point or good observation that, it doesn't feel like you're being distracted or you're being pulled away by looking at social media or being on Twitter or, I don't know, playing whatever the latest game du jour is on your phone. But it's so true. Like, I mean, you kind of don't realize how much a distraction that is. And when you're not using it, you're thinking about it or whatever.
Well,
and
yeah, I think even just the recovery time from like getting a notification and checking your phone is like 15 minutes for you to get back to where you were. I could be like over embellishing that, but I know it's some pretty high amount of time that it just takes for you. Like if you're working on a project, you see a notification on Facebook, you check it, it takes a minute or two, and then for you to actually get back to that project, each time you get a notification text message, you're just wasting time.
Yeah.
So,
no, well, and
Yeah.
that's totally my experience. The way I've always described it is I work like a locomotive. So it takes me a long time to get up to speed, but once I'm up to speed, I'm cranking. But the problem is these little distractions, and oftentimes I'll pause my email inbox, or I'll put my phone on do not disturb, which my wife hates. But sometimes I've just got to do that because I've got to hammer through something, and these little things will pull me off, and it just stops my train, and then I got to start over again. And so for me, it's really difficult to overcome that stuff. So I love this tomato timer idea. And I wish I could remember somebody else on the show had brought that up at one point.
the tomato
Yeah,
timer?
I mean, so it's just, there's all these little tricks and stuff. And so my point of like focusing on things like distraction, like all these times, right? Like we covered earlier that my husband isn't sitting out on the couch somewhere to tell you the cool rock band stories from Kazakhstan. But all these distractions during the day add up. And then what happens is it erodes the time that I have to spend with the people that I love. Like he's not here all day. I have just a few hours in the evening to spend with him. Why do I want to spend it in this constant time of being distracted or having to work really late because I allowed other things that maybe aren't as important, aren't as core to like whatever it is I'm working on, what my most important tasks are. Why am I letting these other things take away from the end goal, which is working, having money, and then spending time with my husband and my family?
Do you have a hard out, like when you get off work at 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever time you're done? Do you have like I'm done, nothing else, taking the rest of the night off every day, or is it kind of just play it by ear?
I really try to do a hard out by 6. That is not always successful.
Yeah.
But
well,
that's what I try to do.
We're entrepreneurs. I mean, it's like, okay, I'll try, but 10 o'clock rolls around and you're still doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So
have you ever done that trick where you hang out with your family and then they all go to bed and you're like, okay, now I'm going to get some stuff done?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You ever done that one?
Yeah. My wife hates that one. But yeah, no, that one happens a lot. Well, not as much anymore, but it used to happen a lot. So maybe, in the spirit of getting distraction under control, one of the things that you have some expertise on is getting business owners and leaders organized. Do you have any like tips or tricks, things that we could start doing today? This tomato timer is maybe one example of a thing we could do, but do you have any other steps or any other ideas you'd be willing to share on how to get organized so that we can maybe shake off some of this distraction?
Oh, wow. Yeah. So, a lot of what I do is help businesses get organized around like their projects. I mean, I think that one of the most important things that you can absolutely do today is figure out, if you don't have like something posted somewhere that's reminding you of your biggest goals, if you're not making quarterly goals with revenue goals and being reminded of your vision and mission and like what is key, like that's one of the most important things you can do. And then like revisit that every day, because it will, that alone should keep you off of like all of these distracting tools right there, and then I like to just keep track. I mean, I think lists are important. I think that keeping track of what you're working on, and then when you're done, like that satisfaction of crossing it off. And I don't always like throw that piece of paper out. Sometimes I just add more stuff to it because there's a real satisfaction of seeing all of those things that I have done.
Well,
crossed off that
there's
list.
a reason why they have a completed list in your task list bar, is so you can actually go back and, oh yeah, I did that. It motivates
Exactly.
you.
Yeah, and I'm notoriously bad at that. I always joke with my wife that I can't manage a to-do list, and so because it's one of those habits that I've just never been able to really get into, I do find much more success, or I'm much more organized when I do use one. But I do have trouble making that into a habit.
He just doesn't want to have her have access to make a to-do list for him.
Well,
I can't handle it. I can't do that.
Well, unfortunately, that's the problem. Is now she wants to make one for me, and her priorities are different than mine.
Right.
So
and it's fun. I just remembered that right now on Facebook, I'm running an unsubscribe challenge. Like I just posted like on Facebook yesterday. I'm like, I'm unsubscribing from stuff. Like I get like so many things because I'm always curious and want to learn about stuff. I was finding I was spending all this time like, unsubscribing. So I just posted on my Facebook, just like personal one. I just said, I'm just, anyone else want to unsubscribe? So I think for the next like 5 days, I'm gonna be like, did y'all unsubscribe from some stuff? This isn't anything formal, but I do think it's like paying attention, right? And it's about kind of, even if you're just kind of mapping out like, well, how much time am I really spending on like some of this stuff? And if you're not really getting that return on investment on it, meaning like, if you're not enjoying it as much as you had wanted to, if you aren't really making any money from it, like whatever your value system is, right? However you define success, if you're looking at all of those things and you're not getting that expected payoff, well, like change it.
Mm-hmm.
Look at it as like a habit that you can change so that you could be more efficient to get to those things that are most important to you.
Do you use a CRM system at all?
I use a tool called monday.com, and it can be used as a CRM. What I'm going to do just for efficiency's sake is upgrade my active campaign. So it'll include the CRM.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm tired of adding new tools.
I've used Monday, their trial period. I didn't like it that much. I liked it, but I didn't at the same time. I'm on it's called Notion. So
Yeah, Notion.so.
Yeah, I really like that one. If anyone's looking for a CRM, I found that very handy.
And it's not a true CRM, but it's a great platform for doing many things in the organization world, whether it's customer retention or whatever.
Yeah.
Can you do generated emails off of it?
I don't think so. Okay. But like I use it, for example, we use Notion.so as our corporate handbook. And so it's, basically everybody that works for us gets access to our Notion database, and they can go look up everything. It's where we put time off. It's where we put everything. So it's kind of a fun tool. It's a good tool for that. But I'm like you. I'm trying to cut down on the number of pieces of software I have to use every month, because not only do those fees just add up, everybody wants $40 and, whatever it is. And so eventually it starts adding up. But just in the spirit of organization and talking about organization, having to be spread across so many different platforms makes it really hard to be efficient.
Yeah.
And I think that when you're picking out software, right, like you have to be able to or talk to somebody who can help you find the things that will grow with you, and that will also reasonably be a part of your workflow. What I find happens a lot, even in my work now, is that people just don't even audit like what they're paying for.
Mm-hmm.
And so it does become like cost prohibitive, and they have all these tools they've been paying for
and aren't using
$20-$40, and they're not using them, or they're using them for one thing. And it's like, well, you have this other tool that actually does that.
Yeah.
And so when you add too many tools, then you don't have time to learn any one tool very well. So it's always important to, when it's almost like that philosophy of your house, like if I bring something in, something has to go out. And it's kind of that way with software. When you reach that, that point of, and I find the best way to do it is to just check in, because they start to add up. It's that shiny object syndrome, that we were talking about.
Well,
I think before we came on.
You're always looking for the better or the faster or the most efficient. I get caught up a lot in the user experience. So if I happen to like the UI better in one platform than another, that's really helpful. I used to use this invoicing software called Harvest that I just loved. Their UI was awesome. The platform was great. It was great for tracking time. We have employees all over the country and all over the world. And so for us, it was a great way to consolidate our time and all that stuff. But they didn't do anything with project management.
Yep.
And so I was always having to have two pieces of software. Since I've migrated to one platform that does both time tracking, invoicing, and project management, but I don't like it as much. The UI is not as good. It's missing features, stuff like that, And so it's a challenge, man. It really is.
Just figuring out workflow is the hardest thing for me. I've got 3 different businesses I'm trying to run, and having one for contracts, having one for CRM, having one for, tasks and all the other stuff. I was constantly trying to update data in 3 or 4 different places, and it's annoying. Did that client pay me? Do I have to go find that check? Do I have to do this? And it's like having it all in one spot is going to change everything and just make it so much easier. But building that system and getting it to where it does what I need and functions the way I want it to has been a nightmare, because I'll find one that kind of does this, one that kind of does that, none that does it all. And this Notion.so is kind of solving a lot of those problems, but I still have to figure out how I'm going to, send my contracts, get them signed. And it's like instead of having 8 different things, now I have 3, and that's a little more manageable, but I'd like to get it down to 1 and then have everything done. So if anyone has that miracle software out there that handles everything I need, call me.
Okay, so Jen, just let's kind of stay in this vein of organization, as that's something that you spend a lot of time doing. What's some organizational advice? And we maybe talked about it a little bit, but if you have any other thoughts to how people might juggle a busy work schedule and a busy life schedule. So, not only is organization and distraction a big deal in business, but it's also a big part of our lives. And how do we best allocate our time? You mentioned with friends and family, and
specifically around football.
Yeah. Secretly, it's because I coach football, and I'm trying to figure out ways to get back to my life. But in general, do you have any organizational tips like that might help people balance? I try and stay away from the whole work-life balance jargon, because I feel so, that's pretty
cliche.
Yeah. Well, it's just one of those broad nets that people throw out there that doesn't really mean anything. And so, but I do like the idea of trying to find some sort of balance, understanding that it, varies by human.
I think the best advice I've gotten, because, I have a podcast too, and I bring all these women on, and some of them have had, kind of tragedy that has led them to start their business, and a lot of them have kind of backed into it, which is not really what you want to do as a project manager, but sometimes that's kind of how things work. And what I mean by backed into it is like, these are the things that I have to do. Like it or not, you're coaching football. So that's like one of the things that you'd have to have on there, right? And you would know like how much time that takes in a week. And in the example that I want to give, this is somebody who went through a divorce, was a single mom, had to make certain amount of money, but then also had the responsibilities of picking your kids up from school and parenting alone, and kind of backed into it that way, which was to say, how do I create a business that's going to make that much money and also afford me that kind of time that I need, to be a good parent and to do all the things that I need to do.
I say just make him walk home.
Little kids.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry to distract you. I'm horrible like that.
I mean, I don't have kids, so I'm a bad person to ask.
Right. Me too. So Ryan's the default here.
So yeah, no worries. Well, no, I think it's one of those things that it's important. I spend a lot of time writing on the importance of personal relationships in business and in life, and just prioritizing people and putting those kinds of things first. And so I think it's really important, and that's why I always pick at people for their perspective on this subject, because I think it's important that, whether you have kids or don't, you still have people that are important, or things that are important, or dogs that are important, whatever it is. And so, everybody's got our own thing. So it is still a matter of how do you, best manage your time so that you can, spend the appropriate amount of time, or the amount of time you desire with those, people or things.
Absolutely. And that's what I mean. It's, it sounds like I'm saying the same thing, like kind of in different ways, but if you value relationships, that relationships take time. And if you're too busy for that, then sometimes what you have to do is really have that hard conversation with yourself around how much am I really valuing these relationships if I'm not putting in the time it's going to take to continue to cultivate it. And I can guarantee you that if you start going through your day and really paying attention to where you're spending your time, you will find out that you're not spending time on the things that you value the most all the time. There's always going to be time that you can cut from one area so that you can spend more of it building those relationships, whether it's within your business or within your family, or coaching football, which I hate to say it, but football season is not all year, right? So
Sure.
I mean,
well, and it's my oldest
but
son's team, so it's an opportunity to hang out with him and all his friends and
then
stuff.
Basketball comes. And
Yeah, of
lacrosse
course, it's one thing after the other. This is the only one I coach, so there is no shortage of crap to run kids to, but this is the only one I coach.
yeah.
So let's take a spin off and go towards the podcasting world. How did you get caught up in that? How long have you been doing it, and any takeaways that you have got from that you want to share with our listeners?
Yeah. I started a podcast. Well, so one of my friends said, "Hey, you'd be really great on a podcast." And I was like, "Really? Okay." And it just sounded really fun. And it also sounded like a good opportunity to practice public speaking and maybe talk to people I wouldn't otherwise have a chance to talk to. And it was as simple as that. Like, I think there are all these people who say, build your business with a podcast. And I'm like, well, good luck. It's a lot of hard work. Yeah. There are probably easier ways that you can build an audience than having a podcast. And it's really worked out. I've been doing it since, I guess, March of 2018.
Okay.
And it's gone through a couple iterations. I mean, I don't know how you guys started. I didn't go back that far, but
don't go back that far. That's our advice for all our listeners. Yeah. Don't go back to the first 20 episodes.
Yeah, we leave them up for posterity. But no, our show too did do some of that, where it jumped around a little bit. It began life as sort of a creativity podcast. I'm in marketing and advertising. Mike is in music and DJ. And so, we both sort of come from creative backgrounds. And so the original thought was that, let's package up some marketing advice, and then we'll just spew it. We'll just write a bunch of notes and then we'll spew it out. And so our first few episodes are like that. Basically, we wrote up, 10 pages of notes and kind of regurged whatever we'd written. And, it was really still I'm glad we took the step. We needed to get, out there and start doing something. But it was, those episodes are really lifeless and soulless. It's not like a flowing conversation. It's just us regurging information. We pivoted a little bit when we had our first guest on. So the first guest that we had call in on the show sort of turned a corner for us, and we realized, oh, wait, we're way better with somebody else. Like together we're fine, but not that great. Like with a third person, we're better. And so then we transitioned there. And at first we had a lot of creative types on, and then that, sort of evolved into more business types and music types and artist types and all kinds of types now. And so now we've got this long, history of interviewing a lot of different people from a lot of different walks of life, all sort of in this frame of trying to understand, the way they use their juice, whether you use it to start a business or, write a record or whatever it is you do, it's you're using basically the same creative stuff inside you to create something, and so we try and explore that a little bit.
No, I think it's great. And mine I started off with a co-host. Those episodes are not available anymore because I've pivoted so far from those very first Third Paddle podcast episodes. And then I changed the name because it was just juggling too many brands. So I just said, it's the name of my name of my business is Women Conquer Business. We'll do that for the podcast as well. And I have different people on it. It's not like I even just have women on the show. I just have people who are willing to share some interesting stories about themselves and who happen to be business owners, right? So it's just a really good opportunity to get a little bit of inspiration, maybe learn a little bit about the heartache that it took before the good inspiring time happened. And it's really relaxed. It's kind of like this where, we're not really, I'm not asking the hard questions for the sale so they can make their sales pitch at the end. Like it's just sort of like, let's just
we
talk
haven't got there yet. We're going to throw that on you at the end. We're going to get you to sign up for stuff and monthly recurring bills. It's great.
Well, I'm sure I get hit up all the time by people who just want to come on my show to sell something.
Yeah.
And I don't really do that. That's not really what the show is about for me. It's about conversations and then asking how people can reach you. It's not about, just
have you read my book?
Well, and that's the thing is I think there's room for all those things. It is actually one of the nice things about podcasting is that you can niche into whatever you want to be. And, it is a little Wild West, so you're allowed to kind of make your own rules, and so it's kind of it's definitely a fun platform to be on. So, it's something we've been doing it for a little more than 2 years now. And, it's something that we, look forward to every week. So,
yeah, I think we had a guest on a few weeks ago. Kelly is a podcasting coach, and she was telling us that there's a podcast out there that talks about escalators. And then she sent me the link a week later. So there, you can literally podcast about anything you want, whether it's going to turn into something. Who knows?
Well, and it just depends, right? For some people, it's not really about that even, and I guess that's kind of the beauty of the platform is you can use it, like you said, and I do too, to some degree, try and use this as a place to sort of develop my talking points and think about the things that I might go speak on at some point or write about, or, this gives me a place to sort of, go out and kind of beat my drum a little bit and see what's working and what I like and what resonates and what doesn't. And so for me, that's more valuable. We don't really have any, major sponsors or anybody, contributing to the podcast. It's just something we just kind of do, and so, but, I get a lot of value out of meeting people, talking about their experience, developing a rapport and developing a relationship with the people we have on the show. And then, getting to do all the personal stuff too is valuable.
Yeah, I feel the same way. And I'm not criticizing the shows that do a lot of marketing. I'm just saying that's not at all what we're about. And I really like developing the ideas and just talking about it. And then getting feedback, and a lot of times you don't hear what people think, and that's another thing too. It's not like public speaking where you can look at people's eyeballs and see how it's going. You're just talking and it's like,
good.
wow.
Yeah.
It's
No, that's
really
why we do
quiet
it this
in
way.
this room.
It's by design. Keep all the eyeballs out of here.
Right.
So cool. Well, hey, we're getting sort of down to the end, so not to be too marketing centric, but where can people find you, learn a little bit more about your business, and catch your podcast?
Sure. My website is jenmcfarland.com. That's Jen with one N, but if you spell it with two, you'll still get there. And if you want to go to the podcast, it's womenconquerbusiness.com. And that's where you'll find kind of the landing page for the podcast and all of the places where you can connect with it. And then I'm also on Twitter and Instagram at Women Conquer Biz. And then on Facebook, you can just find Women Conquer Business. I have a big Facebook page there too.
Perfect. Nice. That's awesome. Yeah. Well, hey, thanks so much, Jen. We really appreciate you coming on the show and taking the time to share your story a little bit. I think there was some great stuff in there. So I'm looking forward to sharing this with our audience. So
awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks
no
so
problem.
much. So take care.
Thank you so much for listening to Eggs, the podcast. You can find us at eggscast.com, at Egg Show on Instagram and Twitter, and contact us through the website through our email. If you have any questions, inquiries, or suggestions, we would love to hear them. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next week.